Throughout history, every empire has claimed that its money was solid and its promises eternally valid. Yet history has disproved these claims time and time again. From Rome to medieval France, from the Confederacy to modern-day Lebanon, societies have woken up to find their savings evaporated overnight, their salaries rendered meaningless, and the economic systems they trusted collapsing before their eyes. Collapse is not the exception, it is often the norm. That's why the real question is not whether financial systems will fall, but how you will protect yourself when they do. People often fall into the illusion of permanence. They look at their bank accounts, their national currencies, their government guarantees, and assume these things are unshakable. But money is not a physical stone. It is a structure built entirely on trust, and that trust can evaporate in a single night. That is why history, though harsh, is invaluable. Every major collapse leaves behind repeating lessons: what truly holds value, and what turns to dust in moments of crisis. Byzantium is a classic example. One of the main reasons it survived for 1,000 years after the fall of Rome was the solidus, its gold coin. For centuries, the solidus was one of the most stable and widely accepted currencies from Europe to Asia. And yet Rome had once destroyed its silver denarius by diluting its purity. Still, centuries later, Byzantium repeated the same mistake, this time with gold. The solidus began to be minted with less and less purity. At first no one noticed, then confidence cracked. As the currency lost value, trade networks fractured, and the economy struggled to stay alive. But some people preserved their wealth. Those who accumulated gold, held stable land, and hid real assets the state could not seize. This is the first historical lesson. States can almost never resist the temptation to debase their currency, and when they do, value flows into assets they cannot print. But not every collapse is triggered by government action. Sometimes a single massive shock is enough. During the Black Death in the 14th century, half of Europe's population perished. Cities emptied out, trade halted. Yet this great collapse also created an economic redistribution. With labor suddenly scarce, surviving workers could demand higher wages. Land and property that were once expensive became cheap because they were abandoned. Families with liquidity, silver, goods, grain, capital, encountered opportunities they could never have imagined. Unfarmed fields and deserted homes lost value like items in an open auction. This picture is familiar today. During COVID, supply chains broke. Governments printed money to keep economies alive. Those with assets profited from fast-recovering markets, while wage earners fell behind. History is clear. Pandemics and crises redistribute wealth, pushing forward those with liquidity and dragging back those without it. The banking crisis of Renaissance Florence teaches another lesson. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial center. The banks of the Bardi and Peruzzi families had grown by lending to kings. But when England's King Edward III failed to repay his debts, these massive banks collapsed overnight. Depositors lost their savings, trade stopped, and the city descended into chaos. People learned a crucial truth: too big to fail does not exist. When major institutions fall, they pull ordinary citizens down with them. During the American Civil War, the destructive power of money printing became obvious. The North issued greenbacks, paper money not backed by gold, while the South printed even larger quantities of graybacks. By the end of the war, Confederate currency was nearly worthless. Prices exploded and wages became meaningless. Unlike the collapsing paper notes, tangible assets like gold, food, and property became the only means of survival. France's monetary collapse of the 1790s is another famous case. Revolutionaries seized church lands and issued a currency called the assignat, supposedly backed by these properties. But uncontrolled printing rapidly triggered runaway inflation. Farmers stopped accepting paper money, bread riots erupted in Paris, and the revolution began sinking under its own economic policies. Once again, the winners were those who held real goods. A similar lesson appeared in the Asian crisis. In 1997, a speculative attack on the Thai baht triggered a collapse of the currency, followed by a chain reaction across Southeast Asia. Countries with dollar-denominated debt were crushed when their local currencies plummeted. Ordinary people lost their jobs and savings, while those holding foreign currency or overseas assets stayed afloat. All these examples lead to the same conclusion. Paper-based monetary systems are fragile. As governments borrow, they effectively make their citizens borrowers too, and in moments of collapse, those who trusted the system the most suffer the greatest losses. The same scenario unfolded recently in Lebanon. Between 2019 and 2021, Lebanese banks froze depositors' accounts. People waited for hours in line to withdraw their savings, but the doors never opened. The lira lost most of its value. Doctors, retirees, engineers, anyone who trusted the system became poor overnight. People learned in the harshest way that money in a bank is actually a loan to the bank. And in a crisis, the bank can simply choose not to pay it back. Do not think this is far from you. In 2008, millions in the US lost their homes while the banks were rescued. In 2023, several American regional banks collapsed in a single night. The myth of too big to fail proved valid only until the moment the door closed. So how does one survive this cycle? History provides no single formula, but it offers clear clues. In Byzantium, it was gold. During the Black Death, liquidity. In Florence, avoiding dependence on institutional guarantees. In France, holding food and property. In Asia, avoiding foreign-denominated debt. The lesson is always the same. Winners are those who turn to assets that retain real value when the system breaks. And there is another truth. Collapse is not only destruction, it is also opportunity. For the unprepared, it is disaster. For the prepared, it is the moment when wealth becomes cheap. The rise of peasants to landowners after the Black Death, and the investors who bought properties for pennies after the 2008 crisis, prove this. But history teaches something deeper. Wealth is preserved not only by what you own, but by what you can do. Those who produce, repair, trade, or supply food do not merely survive crises, they often thrive. Money can lose value, but the need for production never disappears. The conclusion is simple but uncomfortable. Every crisis is a transfer, from paper to the real, from the trusting to the prepared. So the question is not whether the system will collapse, it inevitably will. The real question is whether you will be among those who stand afterward with something real in your hands, or among the majority who are left with empty promises.